talker. If you guys don't know who Carson is, he is just such a cool guy in the sense that he teaches compilers, databases, system programming in C and assembly, and then writes web libraries, which is just like a very disjointed kind of life to live. This guy's a very talented individual. And then he only talks about coaching baseball. So I'm really confused by who this person is. And yet, his internet presence is none of those things. It's just lasers and horses and who knows what's going on. So I really do want Carson to get up here, give an awesome talk. I'm very excited about this. Go get him, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. All right. Is my mic on? I can't tell. This is super fancy. So, Big Sky DevCon, huh? I'm going to plug this in and hope that nothing inappropriate is on my screen. I think we're good. Does it work? Does it work? Come on, baby. Guaranteed to work. Let's go. All right. Well, welcome to HTMX Con. I hope you're all excited to hear about HTMX. I'm actually not going to talk too much. First of all, I guess thank you to Prime. So the whole reason anyone has heard of HTMX is because of Prime and Fireship Dev. So big thank you to those guys. For whatever reason, the internet is what it is. Somehow, HTMX caught the wave. So here we are. And because it caught a wave that I don't understand, I'm going to talk about how my marketing genius led to the situation we're in. So I'm going to give a talk on the gonzo open source marketing. My name's Carson Gross. I teach at MSU. HTMX.org is obviously my big thing. The essays page, I've said this before, I think that's probably more important than HTMX as a library. In the long run, just because there's a lot of stuff about hypermedia, which I think is an interesting conceptual idea, even if you're not into HTMX as an implementation. Do you have a scripting language called HyperScript, which is pretty, it's kind of an ongoing troll that people are actually using in production. So, and then grugbrain.dev is kind of a silly essay that I wrote about the way I approach engineering sometimes. Prime pointed out I work on a lot of different things and kind of have a bunch of different hats. And it's actually pretty easy for me because I just pick which voice in my head I want to listen to. And then, okay, today we're a laser horse. I don't know. We'll figure it out. So HTMX marketing, $0. We've got one DevRel guy. He's also the dev lead, and he's an idiot. And despite that fact, somehow this happened, right? Somehow this happened. So how did that happen? And the answer is, oh no. The answer is, I have no idea, because it didn't happen for Intercooler.js. So Intercooler.js, I actually started back in 2013, and it did, I was like, oh man, I've got 500 stars on GitHub. This is amazing. And then we're big time. I think this was a Hacker News thing, and it went up, and I'm like, to the moon. This is gonna be great. We're gonna finally defeat Angular. And then nothing happened for ever. and then right here, COVID hit. And I was trapped inside, and so I said, I don't know, maybe I'll try and pull the jQuery dependency out. And then, that got a little bit of traction, and then it crossed over, and I was like, cool, And then this happened, and I was sitting on a bucket at the Montana state tournament for youth baseball, and I looked down at my phone, and I'm like, that can't be right. What's going? Twitter's broken again. And I just got lucky. In a big way. So we're going to talk about. I'm just going to give you my sense of what happened with the. And I'm going to preface this by saying it's a science of single instances. I have no idea how this worked. I'm going to tell you what happened to me more than here's what you should do. So here's the thing that happened to me, and here's some maybe big ideas that you can take away from it. So the first thing is that timing is everything. Obviously looking at this graph right here, it's not like these libraries were significantly different than one another. They just were, right place, right time for HTMX, and what works for one person doesn't work for someone else. I've been doing the same thing now for almost a decade, and it didn't work for a decade, and then it started working. I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. Never underestimate dumb luck. Here's kind of what I think has worked for me. The primary thing that I think you have to do when you're in open source work, and probably just in life in general, is stay positive. And I say that as someone who, believe it or not, I'm not a naturally positive person. It's very easy for me to be very sarcastic and actually kind of nasty. When I look back at my younger self, I was kind of nasty online sometimes. If timing and luck are everything, and it seems like they're a big part of things, sticking around is really, really important. And the easiest way to stick around is to have fun. So if you're not having fun, then people aren't going to hang out with you. You're not going to stick with it. You're going to give up on something. Humans like positive people. That's lame, but it's true. That's just the way that it is. So I think that's a way to take like a thing you can do when people are like, oh, timing's everything. Like there's so much luck involved. Yeah, okay. Well, what that means is like hang around. And the way to hang around, in my experience, is to be as positive as possible on stuff. As your project gets more attention, if you're doing open source work, you're going to get naysayers, you're going to get negative people, and it's important not to let those people get to you. I let those people get to me for the first 3 or 4 years of Intercooler.js, and looking back on that, that was really bad for me. They still get under my skin, but I've gotten much better at like, okay, feel bad for a sec and then let it go. So here's some specific tips for dealing with negativity. The first one's a technique called agree and amplify. So take a criticism of your project and agree with that person, and then amplify it. Try and find a positive thing to say about it. So here's an example where a guy comes in and says, Rails did this 10 years ago. Finally, you implemented it. And it's like, well, there's some truth in that. Like TurboLinks has been around for a long time. But as luck would have it, I've got an Intercooler account, and the Intercooler account's been around for even longer. And so I could come in with the Intercooler account and like agree with the guy and then amplify it and have some fun with it. Okay, so try and amplify it, try and make it funny, and try and take that negative and turn it into a positive. So let's see here. Here's an example, and you get a lot of this on Twitter, where it's sort of a passive-aggressive attempt to provoke a negative response, right? So, wow, cool stuff, but I couldn't help wondering, did JS hurt you? Right? Like, that's like an attempt to like get me to be like, no, I'm good, JP, whatever. You can just go the other way and be like, yeah, of course it hurt me. Have you ever used JavaScript? Like, what do you mean? Like, what kind of a question is that? Of course it hurt me. So this is another example of agree and amplify. Another thing that I like to do on Twitter is what's called agree and reasonableify. So you take like what's an unreasonable criticism, and then you turn that into a reasonable criticism. And this one, I actually don't think I handled this interaction as well as I could have. I should have been more positive in it. So you're going to see a defensive reaction first, and then I kind of rescue it with the second tweet. So vanilla.js with fetch is much better, no offense. Okay, I mean, for some stuff, maybe. And then I go, yeah, that's a really good point. And this is sarcastic, Carson, right here. But, what about history and request queuing and like all this other junk that you're not doing with fetch? That was a defensive reaction, and I think that was a bad reaction on my part. The next tweet, he comes back and says, blah, blah, blah. He says some reasonable stuff, like add it as necessary. Yeah, of course, totally agree with that. And I said, I agree with you. I should have led with this. I should have led with, I agree with you. But if you need these other things, then HTMX can be a good choice. That's how I should have responded to this first tweet. So this is an example of me not doing a good job. So I could have done a better job if I had just right out of bed been like, totally, 100%, don't use it unless you need it. But if you need these things, then maybe HTMX is a reasonable idea. That would have been a much better response, okay? And actually, agree and reasonableify has led to a surprising number of people on Twitter who like initially come in hot, like anti-HTMX, becoming either like somewhat like begrudgingly approving or like even, HTMX fans. This has actually been one of the best techniques for me on Twitter. Just flat out agree. This is something I learned from Prime. Prime's really good at this. Like someone will come in and be like, you're an absolute moron. And he's like, yep. Okay, where do we go from there? Right? Like, so here's like Theo, like, putting me down in like the F tier or whatever. And just like, I agree with Theo, because what are they going to do? Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to say with that? I use this a lot on Twitter. I don't know, IDK. It's a super low effort and ambiguous response. So if someone like starts wall texting you, just IDK, I don't know, man. I'll often try and leave an essay in there to that seems somewhat related to what they're talking about to try and distract them from continuing what's probably a pointless interaction on Twitter. But I've gotten a lot of mileage out of IDK. So maybe you can too. CEO of IDK. I don't know. The ambiguity there, I think, often piques curiosity from the person. They're like, what don't you know? And so, why waste many words when one word will do, or one linked essay will do? Self-deprecation and self-criticism. This is one of my favorite quotes from a guy named G.K. Chesterton, is that what embitters the world is not an excess of criticism, but an absence of self-criticism. I think we live in a world, especially on the internet, where it's all about owning other people. And if you can own yourself sometimes, and it's pretty funny. There's a lot of people that'll say, oh, don't do that, you're showing weakness, but I don't know, man. I think that good, honest self-criticism, and we all got, faults, and there's lots of stuff we could do better. I think that can really open discussions up and show other people, hey, it's okay if it's okay that you're not perfect. It's okay. This, HTMX obviously isn't perfect, and so forth. So it would be a lie to pretend that it wasn't, and you shouldn't lie. So don't. Another thing about it is you can get out ahead of, the reality is to all programming approaches, there's pluses and minuses to it. So don't try to hide those. Get out ahead of it, right? I've got that when to use hypermedia essay. And when people come in and say HTMX isn't everything for everything, it's yeah, I totally agree with that. Here's an essay I wrote on it. And I think most projects would benefit from an essay like that, saying hey, here's when this project is a good fit, and here's when it's not such a good fit. So I think self-criticism can be a very valuable tool. One thing, this is another thing, so here's an interaction with a guy named Bjorn who really didn't like HTMX, I posted this essay, when to use hypermedia. I might not get Bjorn to like HTMX, chances are low in this interaction anyways, but often you're not posting for the person you're responding to, you're posting for the people who read that thread. You want to leave information there or leave reasonable responses there, even if they, if they're dunking on you or whatever. If you can leave good responses and informative stuff, it's one thing I love about the essays is I can have a shit post and then I can put an essay in there and then someone can be reading this thing and be like, man, this guy just got owned, but here's this essay, maybe I'll go read that and we'll, get a few converts that way. I think there's some credibility to be gained if you can be honest about the shortcomings of a given project. The HTMX sucks essay, for example, I go after, and that's a tongue-in-cheek essay. There's obviously some stuff where I'm being sarcastic, but a lot of those criticisms are perfectly valid. If you want to have just one JSON API, I get it. It's not that's wrong. It's one approach. So I think being a little self-critical is good for a project. Ignore the haters. You won't. You won't. But at least have positive. So this guy, Jason Knight, he hates me. This guy hates me. He said very mean things to me on the internet, and it's very hurtful. And so I posted a walkthrough of internals of HTMX to YouTube, and he just wall texts here's everything that's wrong with HTMX in the comments. And my typical response to him is hey, Jason, it's good to see you again, buddy. Right? Because I'm not going to respond to I'm not going to respond to this, but it's just good to know that someone's out there and cares, right? So, judicious use of snark. Snark works. For lack of a better word, works. So I don't like I don't like that I like snark, I guess is the way that I would say it. But it works. So this tweet, which is mean, this is me not being positive. This tweet is my number 2 tweet ever, right? And I'm obviously taking a swing at React developers. Now React, it's Vercel and Facebook, they're big boys, they can take it, right? This was an unfair tweet, but it worked. And this is what social media feeds on. Social media wants this, but you can't live in this space. You can't live in this space, okay? So if you are going to use snark, and it does work, it's like dunking on people does work at times, I think you have to be really careful to not overdo it and to like not live there mentally. So, I put sorry here because I knew I was being a little bit of a jerk. But second most popular tweet, hate the player, or hate the game, not the player, I guess. Riding waves, I mean, easy to say when a wave like Prime comes along, right? But I don't know how to make that happen, but the waves happen sometimes, especially if you've got a good idea, and so I really try and ride them. The CEO thing, for example, like someone just started claiming to be CEO of HTMX, and I think they were trying to provoke me. And so I was sitting there, I'm like, man, that kind of sucks. Like, I don't want them to be CEO. Like, what can I do? And then I was like, okay, everybody's CEO. Like, let's just go the other way with it. And now it's turned into, a green amplify, right? And so now it's turned into a really positive thing. It's, that wave's still going. I think one thing I've been surprised is how effective repetition is. And like going back to like certain topics, like you build up sort of I don't know what to call it, but just a set of concepts or memes, I guess, around, and you can keep coming back to them. You can keep using them and little tweaks and stuff like that. People like that. They like it. They like things to rhyme. You can't push too hard on stuff. I've pushed too hard on a couple of things, and things that I thought were going to work didn't work. Things that were just like me randomly one-offing, like turned into big things that I didn't know about. So you just have to kind of, stay on your feet and see what's working, and then do more of it. Everybody wants to be a CEO, so why not let them? And we can mess with all the recruiters on LinkedIn. That's kind of fun. Everybody loves an underdog. How's my time? Am I good for time? Okay. Everybody loves an underdog. I'm not going to lie. I play that up, right? Like, oh, I'm just one guy in Montana with like Prime and like Fireship Dev talking about my stuff and, the power of memes and all that stuff. But people like an underdog. So, and if you're a small open source project in particular, you're guaranteed to be an underdog. And so you can play that up when you have opportunities to, right? So I'm sure you guys have all heard, oh, I'm just one guy in Montana, right? So I say that a lot. People like an underdog. Humor is good, I've heard. Humor is self-replicating. The HTMX community is pretty funny. Sometimes a little inappropriate, but usually not. Humor is one of those things people like. People see people laughing. Even if they don't get it 100%, they're kind of like, okay, like I can get into this. What's going on? What's going on with this stuff? And it helps broaden your message. Here's an example of Drizzle ORM saying, how are we losing to some pickle HTML framework? And it's like, yeah, you are losing to a pickle framework. You like me now, Drizzle. But those guys, they're similar. They're very funny, and they use Twitter in the right way, I think. They don't take it too seriously. They joke around, and so I corrected them. It's not a framework. It's a library. And just, have fun with that, and it's self-replicating. They retweet you, you retweet them, you have some fun with it, you get in their replies. Humor really, really works. Another thing I've tried to do is to thrive on criticism. It turns out I don't want to say enjoy, but you can get pumped up by criticism. So I used to have a really bad reaction to criticism. I'd get one of those cortisol dumps, I think. Is that what it is? I forget what the hormone is when you get like criticized and you're like, oh, I'm so mad, and like fight and flight and all that stuff. And now I guess it's maybe the fight and flight reaction. Instead of flight or like anger and like being like all upset about it, like use that to fuel yourself. And I really I look forward to Jason Knight's posts. I literally do, because I'm like, he's gonna say something that's so mean and it's gonna be hilarious, right? So I do respond. I try not to respond, and I try not to worry about it. But even for me, even today, it still gets under my skin. I think you do have to mix in serious content. I think the essays page on HTMX is very useful, and I think if all I did was ridiculous posting on Twitter, it wouldn't be as effective. You gotta lead with the posts, and then have the essays there for when people get serious about stuff. So I think you do have to have good content as well. This one's a little spicy, but appeal to national pride. I do intentionally try to reach out to people that are in other countries and like find out what their national animal is and like all that stuff, and make one of these AI-generated images, because a lot of these communities, they've got their own language. They're a little bit isolated from English-speaking Twitter. And it's a way to like get in and find some people. And so I've had a lot of success in like just a bunch of random kind of, like I think one was I think this is North Macedonia, right? Like, which is a lion with a sweet flag. And you know, I'm sure there are more HTMX users in North Macedonia than there would be if I hadn't, you know, put this tweet out. It's dangerous because of the geopolitical stuff. Like, I'm not getting into any of that. Don't try and bait me. I'm not doing any of that. But it has been effective for me, so that's worked. Beefing, ABB, always beef bigger. Never beef with a smaller account, and never take beef seriously. If a smaller account tries to beef with you, if you get big, usually I think the best response is to ignore the beef. And then later on, if they've got good technology, like give them a boost. You know, that's what they want anyways. And so rather than doing the negative thing and being like, oh, you suck, how many GitHub stars do you have, right? Like, don't get into that with like the guy. That's just a negative feedback loop. If they're good tech, give them a gentle boost earlier. Now, this is an example of a beef where I was beefing bigger for sure. Bun JavaScript was super hot. And I was trying to get them to retweet an HTMX thing, and they didn't take the bait, but they did tell me to delete my account, which I consider a successful outcome. I'm on good terms with the Bun guys now, but that was a successful outcome of that beef. Sometimes you can beef with your friends. So where's Warren? Is Warren around here? Is he around there? There he is. Shut up, Warren. Beefing with your friends can be really effective because you can keep it real fun. You can actually be meaner, right? Like without like starting an actual physical altercation. Social media wants drama. That's one of the bad things about social media. So you can give it drama without it being real drama, without it actually hurting anyone. And one way to do that is to beef with your friends. So I think that's a good technique. I've tried beefing with myself with the Intercooler account. I'd say the jury's still out on this one. There's actually 2 other people with access to the Intercooler account. So sometimes I'm beefing with, I don't even know who I'm beefing with, like, but they're friends. So, this has been fun. I don't know how effective it's been. I think there's some people that are like, you're crazy. They're not wrong. Memes. Memes work. There's just no 2 ways around it. Memes have had a big effect on the world in the last 10 years. You need to work at it to get good at it. The reason I'm pretty good at memes is because I've been doing them for 20 years now. I mean, I was on the message boards back in the day, and like, I spent a lot of time doing this stuff. You got to find your voice. I've got a particular voice. It's probably not the same as yours. So you got to play around with memes and see what works for you. Some people are really good at self-deprecating memes. Some people are, just depends. So find your voice. Don't try and, obviously you're going to mimic people at the start. But try and find your own voice. And I can't recommend enough just staying positive. Try not to be mean because it's not good for you. And I don't think it's that effective at the end of the day. I just don't think it's that effective at the end of the day. So in summary, I don't know how any of this worked. Like, I'm as shocked as everyone in this room that any of this stuff worked. And it didn't work for a long time. I definitely got more positive over time and less like concerned with outcomes over time. And then suddenly it like started working. And so hopefully something in this talk is useful for you, if not for marketing your software, at least like in life and in online discourse. But I really want to stress this staying positive. When you're online, it's just a better headspace for you, and I think in the long run, you're more likely to win people to your cause if you can stay positive about stuff. So I think that's it. Yeah, that's my last slide.